Hi, I'm Sally Russell and thank you for tuning into this episode of Hick Talks, Welcome to Helsingborg. This is a podcast series in English designed to demystify the city of Helsingborg for its international residents. In this episode, we interview Kadom and Maria Bullock, two Swedish friends who have lived abroad as expats and experience what it's like to return to their home country. We ask them, how do you make friends with a Swede? Hi, Åsa and Maria. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I'm really glad that you could take part in our podcast because you're both Swedish women who've lived abroad for long periods of time and then returned to your home country. So you're in a perfect position to help our listeners with tips for making friends in Sweden. Does that sound okay?
It does. Very good. Very good. We like to help. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. Åsa, why don't you tell us about yourself first?
All right. Well, my name is Åsa. Some of you probably already know who I am, met me perhaps at one of the HIC meetings. I am born in Sweden, so I'm Swedish. I'm born in a city called Halmstad, which is about 1 hour north of here. I had a very happy childhood, but when I turned 18, I thought that the city was just a little too small for me. So I packed up my bags, left my family, and went to Toronto, Ontario in Canada. I was just going to go for like a year or so learning the language, traveling, but I ended up staying for 11 years. And I re-educated myself when I was there. And I also got married to my lovely husband, Ed. And we also managed to have our first child while we lived there. So in the year of 2000, in the summer, I moved back to Sweden. And when we arrived here, we settled in my old hometown. And we actually had our second child, Hannah. It didn't take long until we realized my husband actually had a hard time finding a job here. So we packed up our bags and headed over to the UAE in Abu Dhabi, where my husband found a good job and we lived a happy life. We stayed there until 2010 in the summer when the kids finished school. We moved back and that's when we came back to Helsingborg. Me and the kids have been here ever since. But my husband has been moving back and forth. So we have traveled quite a bit the last 11 years, but now finally he's actually back here for good. Yeah, I'm a true Swede again after so many years. I left 1999 and I'm actually back full-time in Sweden by 2021. So
yeah, fantastic. Yeah, you had quite a journey really, didn't you? Because going out to Toronto when you were really very young, and I know you had a really interesting time out there and worked and did different kinds of jobs, educated yourself, as you say, and came back with a husband and a small baby. So
no, it's been a great adventure, and I mean it's still an adventure being in Sweden and refinding things and doing stuff. So no, we're very happy, and I have had an exciting life so far, and I'm looking forward to the next 20 years or so.
Lovely. And what about you, Maria? Where are you from? What's your background?
I'm a pure Helsingborg woman.
Aha.
I'm very proud of it. And what I've done here is to love the city, to enjoy the city. And then, of course, I found my love of life in Cyprus on a vacation trip. And that was my husband-to-be. So actually, and he's from Australia, but we got married in 1993 in Sweden. And then we moved to Australia, and then we decided, all right, how about trying America at the Australian consulate? And we stayed there between 94 to 98. And our firstborn, Alexander, was born 95 in Los Angeles. We lived in LA. And then when we came back to Australia, we were there for around 1.5 years. And then I sort of got very, very homesick, and we moved back 2000 to Sweden, Helsingborg again. And there was a little girl born, Natalie. So she was born 2000. And that's a quick story. That's how it is.
Okay. So just to get that right again, you were living in Australia and also in LA. So those were those are the different countries you were in. Yeah. So before we talk about making friends with Swedish people, I'd like to ask, how was it when you lived abroad? Did you find it easy to make friends, or did you find that some cultures were easier than others to make friends in? How did it work for you both?
Do you want to start?
I thought it was very easy. I thought it was easy and didn't have any problems at all. Talk to people, people talk to you. It seems easier to get in contact with people abroad than it is here. A little bit hard.
Okay. But do you think that's because when you're abroad, you make more effort and you realise that, you know, you don't have your usual friends around you, so you do have to kind of try, or perhaps you just need to be talking to different people?
You sort of trying a little bit harder. Maybe you go to that cafe, maybe you go to the beach easier, or you go to the mall, or you make the telephone calls that maybe you shouldn't need to do in Sweden. That's how I learned, and I start talking to the neighbors, and
Yeah, I know what you mean. And what about you, Osa? How did you find it when you were living abroad? Was it easy to meet people and make friends?
Well, when I moved to Canada, I found it quite easy to make friends, but I went there as a au pair, and I met other au pair quite easily, and you stick together and you talk. The real, my true Canadian friends, I actually did not meet properly until I actually started to go to school, where I went to class with all these people. But no, I had no problems. It's a little easier. Perhaps North American culture is a little more open than the Swedish. So, you start to talk to somebody on the subway or in the park or something. So no, I had no problem finding friends in Canada. Going to the UAE, I will have to say thank you, my kids, because it was through the school I met my friends. And since I went to such a different culture for me, it was, the Arab culture and a little different lifestyle, I had a hard time getting into the locals. They were hard to penetrate. But all the international crowd, of course, my children went to an international school. So that was easy. But once again, I had quite a bit of North American in me after 11 years in Canada, that I think I just were a little bubblier than perhaps I would have been if I stayed in Sweden. So I just kind of met people and started to talk to them. But no, I mean, I can't say I had a hard time finding friends. It's like what Maria said. You need to make the effort to make friends. You have to perhaps go to that cafe or go to the mother's club or to the whatever it might be. But no, overall, it wasn't hard to make friends, but you needed to make an effort. But otherwise, I made some very good friends that I'm still friends with. So I think it works if you just make the effort.
Yes, yeah. And I suppose when you were in Canada, you're like all of us, perhaps when we're students or whatever, you're younger, you meet like-minded people quite easily, and I think you're all interested in each other and wanting to do things and hang out. And I guess as au pairs as well, you've probably got lots of experiences to swap and questions you want to ask of other people. So I suppose that's quite easy. And I'm guessing also in the UAE that that's what you might consider a kind of a true expat lifestyle, isn't it? You're in a very particular kind of environment there.
Absolutely. But no, it was all fun though. Make the effort and perhaps step out of your comfort zone a little, and there you go. No problems.
Yeah, thank you. This, I think, is maybe perhaps when it gets harder, and that's when you moved back to your old environment. I mean, I know I found this in the UK, that when I moved back to what had become my hometown, moved away like most people, university, jobs, all that kind of thing, started my own family. And then we were very happy to move back some years later when I was expecting my second child. But even though I'd been to school there, even though I had family there, even though, I knew the town like the back of my hand, it still I really felt like a stranger in my own town. And I think it was because I was coming back in a different situation. I was coming back as a parent with another child on the way. And I suppose, you've changed a lot in that period. So that was just a really, easy move. I mean, we're only talking about 40 British miles or something back to where I had my mum, my sister, old friends, school friends, etc., etc. But it was still quite weird. I felt like a stranger in my own town. So what about you? How was it for you when you both moved back? Did you find you were able to slot back into your friendships with your old friends or what? How did it work?
Well, for me, my first move back when I was the younger me with one child, I actually struggled quite a bit. And just like you said, Sally, I felt like a stranger. Despite coming back to my hometown, I actually lived with my parents the first 4 months, and I had like my cousins and everybody there, childhood friends. But I struggled because during the 11 years I was gone, they had continued their life like it was when I left. They were still in jobs, which is quite common in Sweden. You like to stay for a longer time in your job, at least at that time. Well, I had done so many different things and I felt very left out, and I had a really hard time. And even if my very good friends talked to me and I was with them, they really didn't have time or couldn't quite understand what I had been doing. So I struggled. I had a very hard time the first time I came back. But at the same time, I had 2 little kids. I was busy. I did perhaps not make the effort that I should have. But yeah, it was tough. I don't think I ever felt so lonely as I did that move home.
Yeah, and that's the surprising thing, isn't it? Even with what should be that, in theory, we've got all that support around us, and it can still be really strange.
I think it is because they have no idea what I have done. I went to another country. I re-educated myself. I worked in, governmental offices. I worked in law firms. I did all these things, but they just could not see what I had done, and they did not understand. And I think maybe I was a little too young at the time to go back and look at myself and say, okay, why don't I speak about their life? And maybe it would be easy. Perhaps I was a little selfish. I don't know. Or like it's hard to know how to go about it. But yeah, that first time I did struggle. Yeah. My second time, mind you, coming back from Abu Dhabi when I was a little older, I was a little smarter, I think, because my kids went straight into an international school and I met similar-minded people that have done very similar things to me. But despite them may not be Swedish, I still made new friends. So that was an easier transaction. Yeah. And of course, I was a mom who put my kids into every activity there was when I came to that point. They were in tennis, they were in horseback riding, football, kayaking, swimming. So I went out and met people. Yeah. And I made a total different effort at that time to actually look at, okay, what do I need to do to meet people and get back into it? So moving away from my hometown to a new city in Sweden where everything was brand new was so much easier for me. I actually adjusted way better coming into Helsingborg than I did coming into Halmstad. And then, of course, I met you 2 lovely ladies there, and I made really good friendships. Definitely so much easier to come back the second time. But maybe because I had a little more experience, maybe I was a little more confident. I don't know.
I expect so. A little older, a little wiser, hopefully.
And, with 2 kids in school age, it's definitely easier to get into a culture and make new friends.
Definitely makes a big difference, doesn't it? How about you, Maria?
I'm just thinking about what Elsa is saying here. You sort of get into 2 groups. You get into the old group when you return that you had when you left. And then, because you got your children, you get the group. There are the mothers, there are the soccer mothers, there are the gymnastic mothers, there are all that. So I would say the children formed us more like, all right, this is a time to make also new friends. And one thing I also learned very quick was to get a dog, because if you have a dog, you always meet people. The hardest thing with a dog is they actually remember the dog's name, but maybe not yours. So that was really helpful. But I have to say the children's activity, that was a big opening doors. And as we said, the international school where we met is also a big love in my life now, because that's where I met all the people that have been through the same situation as yourself. Yes. And you can talk to them about it, because it is a little bit hard maybe if you start talking about the consulates things where I was helping out, and I worked as a travel agent for a while, but not everybody sort of know the ambassador or the consulate life. But in international school I felt, yes, I can discuss the things happening around in the world without being weird.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's true. You're going to find people with many more similar experiences, aren't you, of what it's like to move abroad and move into a new society, a new culture, all those kinds of things. And I always remember a friend of ours who was moving back to the States, and she knew it was going to be difficult when she went back, even though, again, she had good family and friends around. And I just remember her saying, no one is going to be remotely interested in what I did in Sweden. And I think that's it, isn't it? The friends that you've known for a very, very long time, what you did in another country is just kind of, it's almost a closed door, isn't it?
Exactly. And
Exactly.
you have to be able to jump between the 2 or 3 worlds that we're in, because you are so, what should I say, more open. When you're an international traveler, you have to be, and I'm not saying that it's wrong, but a little bit bigger city, Helsingborg, is probably easier than you just mentioned, Halmstad. I mean, in a bigger town, it's easier to meet people that are more international.
Oh, absolutely. I remember walking in my little town, like I came from a little neighborhood just south of Halmstad, actually. And I was like the Canadian girl. Like that's all they knew me of. Like people, that's how they recognized me. And instead of being, Bengt and Gumrit's daughter, who they all knew, I became like the Canadian girl, the girl who married with someone different. And so, I mean, I feel like you just lose your identity a little bit because they look at you a little different. And it's like you said, you have to live in all these worlds. So you have to have like your Swedish way, or I have to have my Arabic way, or my North American way. I have to kind of pick, where do I belong? But I kind of like to think I belong everywhere. And I learned a lot from that now. And coming to Helsingborg, I think I drew a lot of knowledge of that. And I learned to meet people from all cultures. You accept people in a different way after being away for so long and meeting so many different people from different cultures. I think the weirdest thing coming back is that you have to do the reverse thing. When you go abroad, you have to be very open to other cultures, and you have to make an effort to fit into their society. You get so used to that. But when you go home, you have to reverse back into what you used to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
That could be the hard thing. Like, I know you have to kind of take a step back and say, okay, like, people are not strange, or this is not strange. This is actually who I am from the beginning. But you reverse and look and say, okay, all right, this is how it is. This is how I should behave. This is the society norm. And, we are different. We cannot deny that. Swedish people are not like Arabic people in the UAE, nor are they like North Americans. So you have to kind of just rewind yourself a bit. And go back to that 80-year-old I was when I once left, to kind of dig down and find, okay, how do I do this? You have to kind of start a little from the beginning.
Yeah. So you're sort of digging down and finding your Swedishness again, perhaps. So as you say, identity is important, and it's difficult. And I think for those of us who have moved around a little bit, even if it's only 1 or 2 countries, sort of retaining our own identity, and yet still having a foot in both camps, where we're from and where we're living, and maybe other countries like you thrown into the mix. It's quite difficult sometimes, I think, to find the right balance.
But it's also one word that we use in Sweden is lagom.
Yes.
In between. That is so typical Swedish. If you're going to go with the flow in Sweden, you have to be lagom. Not too much outstanding, not to be too shy or talk too much about what you have done, for example. We talked about, as we said, to just be lagom. And then that is the easiest way.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good point too. So were there any other ways you think that you made new friends when you moved back?
It's also, we come back to personality.
Yes.
It must be hard for maybe someone who doesn't have that, if I say, outgoing personality in a new country. But then I recommend school activities, the library with a coffee there. Maybe you start talking to the lady who's selling the coffee at the library, or go swimming and say hello to the lady who's sitting there. But the children and the dog has been, it is big outdoor.
Yeah.
And allow yourself to do it with baby steps, I think is important. Like, do not get disappointed if it doesn't work out well first time. Maybe you meet someone who's not comfortable with English, unless you don't speak Swedish with them. Or, like, don't see things as failure when you come here. It's not easy. And we have to remember, despite a lot of people speak English here in Sweden, a lot of people get perhaps a little intimidated and uncomfortable speaking English. But if you come and you do not speak Swedish, I mean, learn the language, even if it's with baby steps, and don't be shy. I think everybody appreciates someone trying rather than just ignoring it. And yes, we said activities. I mean, football and riding has been my biggest places where I have really met good new Swedish friends. And they are still my friends after many, many years.
But I was also thinking, we have the gym, we have the yoga classes, we have, for example, how to cook classes, and maybe you can contribute with a dish from which country you come from. I mean, there is openings, and then we have kommunen, Helsingborg's town, who also have a sort of a helpline, or we have HIC that come and help out and ask question when you come into the country. Ask, how can I, what should I do?
I mean, I must say, I wish there was a HIC when I first came back.
Yeah.
Because that would have been so much easier to get in.
I know.
If you come to HIC and there's not a lot of perhaps Swedes, because most Swedish people may not be drawn to this particular kind of thing. But at least you meet people that might be able to help you go out and meet other people. And it's an effect of meeting one, meeting two, meeting three people, and that's amazing. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for your help.
I think a good thing to do is, if you would, let's say, pick up your kids from school, instead of standing with your own group of ladies who all speak perhaps your home language, break loose and speak to somebody else. That's also a way of actually meeting people. Try to take a step out of your own culture. Because if you stick to your own culture and your own group, you might find it hard to get into the Swedish culture. If that's what you want, I should say. If that's what you want.
I think from what you're saying, though, it sort of shows the how useful a safety net can be. So even, if you've got something when you first move to another country, it's just something you can turn to, or some organisation you can turn to. And, I feel a little bit like that with HIC as well, because people may not always want to just be mixing with other international people. Their goal really is going to be hopefully to meet more Swedish people, integrate, certainly if they're going to be here long term. So the value of HIC is really to help people when they first arrive as a soft landing. And it's wonderful if people do continue to come to HIC events as well and still get the value from them, when they've actually been here a long time. And I know there are some great friendship groups around of people who have come together specifically because they've met through HIC. So for me personally, that's always a huge, huge pleasure to see. And I'm really happy about that. I was just thinking, though, we ought to start talking a little bit more about, what it's like making friends with Swedish people. So we've talked a little bit about some of the ways in which you can get in. And I think one of the themes that comes up again and again is that really what we're all looking for is common ground. And, you can't necessarily just go to a bar or something and make a friend. It doesn't work like that. But I think it always comes down to common interests. So joining an association, if you play tennis in England, come and play tennis in Sweden, because that's how you'll make friends, because you care about the vocabulary, you care about the activity. It's all relevant and pertinent to you. Similarly, we always through HIC recommend volunteering, because people find again and again that interacting in some kind of volunteering capacity is just one of the best ways to get to know other people. And when you're giving something, I think we forget actually, if we're not volunteering very much, we forget just how valuable volunteering is, because we just actually end up getting so much out of it ourselves. So that's really good. But I've got a couple of things I want to ask you about. This is a bit more specific about perhaps a foreigner's perception of Swedish people, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, for example, it's been explained to me that Swedish people are very loyal to their friends, and that it's very common for the same group who've known each other from school or university to meet regularly, you know, for midsummer, for New Year, and all that kind of thing. And people sometimes reflect that it's quite difficult to be included. Perhaps they've got neighbours or friends, and I've heard a few people say as well that, you know, they've invited the neighbours round, they've asked people over for dinner, they've asked people over for parties, and they feel they never get invited back. So is this about the fact that Swedish people are sort of tend to stick with a close group of friends, or what? What do you think about that?
No, not totally. No, it's just that it could take a little bit longer because it's more a planning in the Swedish home to have a party or get together. I felt it was more natural abroad than in Sweden. You plan it more.
I think that, yes, it takes a little more planning perhaps. We cannot forget most Swedish households actually have two working parents. So they are work all day and then they have to pick up the kids. So perhaps they look a little more at, okay, this is our free time. What are we doing with it? Let's make it worth our time. So I think perhaps that's why it seemed to take more planning, or maybe that's why other people seem to think it takes more planning. And when it comes to this whole thing about holidays, I can somewhat agree with what you said there, because me coming back even as a Swede, I had a hard time finding a group to spend midsummer with or New Year's Eve with, because I think we are creatures of habits in Sweden a little bit, and we like to stick to what we always done. But I was persistent and I got myself a little group. So now every New Year I spend this, New Year with the same people. But I can see how that can feel a little difficult because we get used to it. Midsummer we spend perhaps with families that have kids in the exactly same age. So it's easy. We try to find easy ways to socialize with friends, and it makes it easier if you have someone with the same kind of dynamic in your family, perhaps.
It's been with the children.
Yeah.
But there, actually, I would like to recommend Swede and Fredriksdal, who has activities, for example, now, as you said, midsummer.
Yes.
A big event, and that's a chance to meet others and maybe jump around in a little frog dance.
Yeah.
Because it could be a Swede behind you.
Yeah.
And you turn around, is this normal in Sweden? An opening phrase, for example, for hello, so-and-so. So I recommend that. And then, no, I would say that midsummer has always been a group, but then it has expanded because the children came into the groups, and then they had friends, or I met a lady there, or it was that, or that one got married. Maybe not that quick expanding as in other countries, but here it happens, right?
Of course, and new friends always come into groups, and it's not impossible, of course not.
No.
Perhaps it is a little difficult, but if you find one Swedish friend, start with that.
Yes.
Speak to them. What are you doing?
How do you do it?
And I think then perhaps you will be invited in. It's a fine line, I think.
It is. I have to agree. You have to know somebody.
Yeah, you do.
Yes.
But then Fredriksdal and Sofiero is a great thing. But because I remember I took my husband to Sofiero for the first time, and I showed him Sofiero, I have showed him Fredriksdal, I showed him Ramlösa, and there we also have the bonfire, and he sort of, all right, what is happening here, and that. And then people thought, okay, he speaks English, how about I try a couple of words? And that was also a little door opener.
Yes.
So don't give up.
Yeah, don't give up. I think that's good advice. Yes, yeah. And I do think as well that, in some cultures, people are more spontaneous and they drop round at any time, and that's perfectly acceptable. But I think, as you just touched on as well, in most families, both people in a couple are working. I think time is more precious, and as you say, free time is more planned. So you don't just sort of knock on somebody's door and say hi, or just drop around quite so much. And I also think, from my own experience, I do feel that Swedes really value their friendships too. I don't think they make shallow friendships. And in some cultures, people can sound very very open and very welcoming, but it's not perhaps the depth of friendship that you might get. But I do honestly believe that if you've got a Swedish friend, there is a friend for life.
I think I agree with that. I think, I can see how it's hard to perhaps penetrate the Swedish, I was going to say market, which is not, but the Swedish friendship circle. But when you get in there, I think you might have a friend for life. I think we're quite loyal and honest to each other.
Yes. Yeah.
I can understand how it might feel hard because extroverted cultures, when they come here, they're very open, they're very and then they talk to everybody, while a Swede is perhaps a little more careful, a little more, and we're afraid to step on other people's toes, and we don't want to interrupt, and we don't really like to, we don't want to intrude on somebody else's space. And like everybody always talk about, I'm sitting on the bus and no one talks to me, and I kind of smile because I'm like, because they don't want to bother you, they don't want to, that's the time where they're probably coming home from work. They might just have their little relaxed time before they get off the bus to go pick up the children, or they just chill a little right after. But that can sometimes come out as being rude. They're quiet people in that way. I think we try not to bother others, and we like our own space a bit. But hey, be a little pushy sometimes. And they will speak to you. Be
a little bit lagom with that. Don't push too hard, because then and
if you're out walking, say hello. People actually enjoy that. Smile at them, or just say, "How are you today?" And I think you perhaps get a positive response there. And let's not forget, Swedish people love to speak English. So if you just find that right person, they will not stop talking to you if you find that person who actually enjoys it.
They do. Now, I've got another question for you. This might sound a bit cheeky, but again, it's a reflection that people come up with from time to time. And that is it true that neighbours in apartment blocks try to avoid speaking to each other? Is this true?
No, I never done that, but no, I actually find that my neighbors enjoy talking to me here. I find that way more in Sweden actually than I have done anywhere else of the places I've been. I find my neighbors way friendly here, because that's a very quick little chit chat, and that's it,
Yeah.
And I moved a few times in Sweden, and my neighbors have always talked to me, and I've always been happy to chit chat. I think I even had a coffee across the hedge, We go over to each other's homes and chit chat and stuff. So I don't know.
I would agree with that a garden is actually very good, or a hedge, as you said, because it seems like this is sort of a neutral ground. And that's where you can talk a little bit. I agree with you with that. Yes.
And I think if you're out as a lady, Sally, I know you love your gardening. And I'm sure if your neighbor is out who also likes gardening, you could say, "Oh, excuse me, how do I do with my apple tree here? Well, do you know what flower this is?" And I'm sure they would speak to you, So the garden could be a good way of meeting friends.
but it could also be like, if you're talking about a house block, do you know which day they pick up the garbage? Or do you know how to do the right timing for washing if you have a key for the lock in a house block? I mean, a little bit like that. I'm not sure about this, but how do I do this? It could be a little thing.
Yeah. Actually, I think always asking questions is, even if we maybe know the answer already, is always a really good way to get talking to people, isn't it? And
that is a thing. When I moved in, I think I was 20, And that was a good thing, especially to talk to the older people, because then they accept you being young and take you under their wings, right?
Yes.
And perform in the laundry room and the garbage room, then you're on the good side. And ask.
I think that's a really good point, actually, because maybe if you're, a young international person here living in a block, and you've perhaps got older people around you who think, who is this person from abroad, and what are they going to be like, and are they going to be noisy, or are they going to be cause problems because they don't know what to do? So if you can just be a little bit humble sometimes, or a little bit sort of.
I remember, Sally, I have to tell you a really funny story. An older man in the block, it was actually the neighbor, and it's many, many, many years ago. He knocked on our door and he said, "Excuse me, I'm going to open a surströmming jar, pickled
my goodness,
herring jar. I'll 2 days time. Do you mind?" And I was sort of, no, it's okay. I tell you, that was a smelly thing for at least 5 days in the whole.
But the neighbor loved you after that.
he asked me, and I couldn't be upset about it because he knocked on the door and he asked. So that was a give and take there too.
Okay, well, that was very good of him, even if you were very kind to say yes. No, and that just reminds me in a funny sort of a way of something else, because I was sending some messages with a group of friends of mine in the UK, and I said something about, have you seen Midsummer yet? And one of the friends came back and said, yeah, but Swedes are weird. And so all I'm saying is, if you're coming to Sweden for the first time, or you want to learn about Swedish culture, I don't recommend the film Midsummer. It might give you a very warped view of what to expect.
Well, we have some really strange traditions, and people look at us like we're absolutely nuts. But we have fun. We're proud.
And
we stick to our traditions, and
we try to get them involved.
Try to get people involved.
Yes.
We might be a little timid, people think we're cold, but we just being respectful and try to not bother people, I think. And I think these are misunderstandings of Swedes sometimes.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
And we just have to be patient with us a little, Maybe they're lucky enough to meet me and Maria one day. We will introduce them to the Swedish way.
I think that's the answer. Yeah.
But I think people should also remember, which I think is something people do forget when they come to Sweden. It is that English is not a first language.
No.
And I heard a lot of people say, but they don't understand me. And I think, but maybe it's because you speak English, and we are speaking Swedish in Sweden, though so many people speak English, like you almost feel like it's an English-speaking country with an accent.
Yeah.
So if you meet, especially an older person, and you speak English, they might come across like they are a little rude. But I think that is because they try to answer you in a language they don't really know, and they use perhaps the tone of the Swedish language in the English language, and that's when it goes sour. That's when it goes downhill from there, because if you put the Swedish tone on an English thing, you can sound quite rude.
Okay.
I don't think they mean to be rude to you. So, especially with the older people, have a little patience with them, because they might come across as rude.
A little bit slow. Talk a little bit slower English.
But they not, and because I know my parents, when I brought my husband home, we are trying very hard, and he had a struggle. He could look at them like, what did your dad just said? And I'm like, no, he didn't mean it in a harsh way. It just came out as a harsh way because he used the Swedish tone on an English word, and it just kind of turns around and sounds very rude. We're not so rude, and we're actually quite friendly people. So don't give up on us. Don't give up on us. We are
no, not at all. No. And I think also that perhaps what you're just saying about, if you're talking with older people, they might be, the language that they learn some decades ago, like me now with my French some decades ago, is perhaps a lot more formal. So although their English is fabulous, because all Scandinavians speak amazing English, we know that, perhaps it's just a little formal. And because we're so used to hearing them speaking English so very, very well, we forget, as you just said, that, it is still a second language, and they may not have particularly up-to-date idioms or what have you, but they're still,
exactly.
it's still very good.
I think that's a big thing that people, it's a misunderstanding quite often when it comes to us. We don't understand each other perhaps. And if you've never really been abroad, it's hard to get the tone of the second language. Like me and Marie, I'm sure you have quite a few interesting story about going and we start to speak English in a country that is English speaking. They look at us like, oh, you're immigrant. Like, how do you speak? And no, you say it this way or you do it this way. It's not always easy.
Yeah.
So it's easy to forget because we do. A lot of us do.
Yes.
A lot of English. Yeah. I think even I forget. When I tell my husband, go and fix it yourself. And he's like, but I don't know what to say. And I'm like, they speak English, I'm totally a plane too, because it's so normal here.
And also that the husband has to learn Swedish too, of course.
Pick up some Swedish words
You
and
do,
everything.
you do.
Yeah. Well, it sounds as if we've covered everything. Are there any other top tips for international people living here?
Try to get involved in some activity.
And that
That's
would be
adorable. It's adorable.
absolutely
Yes.
the best way is to find people or do something you like.
Yes.
And find friends through that. And hey, have fun. Don't worry, speak Swedish. We don't care. We help you out if it's something that's wrong, or we understand you.
Fantastic. Well, lovely. Thank you so much for talking to us today. I think you've given lots of advice and insight. So I'm sure this will be a fun episode to listen to. So thank you very much.
Having us.
All right, then. Have a great day.
Yeah. Tack så
Take
mycket.
care. All right. Hej då.
Hej då.
That was nice.
Are we done?
Thanks very much to Åsa and Maria. Please join us next time when we'll be finding out about your options for choosing a Swedish language course. And thank you for listening. If you've got any thoughts or questions from this episode, you can find us at www.hiconnections.eu. On social media, we're on Instagram at HIConnections, and on Facebook and LinkedIn, you can find us at Helsingborg International Connections. We'd love to hear what you think, so please do get in touch.